Good morning, Boulevard family. I must make a confession to you this morning. My wife and I, Dawn and I, have an insatiable desire for the Bourne Identity movies. Anybody want to join that club? How many of you have seen any of the Bourne movies? All right, most of you have seen the Bourne movies, yeah. If you have not seen the Bourne movies, okay, the Bourne movies are, Matt Damon plays Jason Bourne, this young man who has somehow kind of been inducted into this ops program for the CIA or something, and he has been retrained, highly trained, renamed to be basically an assassin throughout the world for wherever they want to send him at the time, all right? And through this kind of strange series of events, the first movie, Bourne Identity, begins with the fact that he has completely, through his training and through some other events, he has lost track of who he is and his complete identity. He's forgotten everything, all right? And so there's this one part in the movie, very, very early in the movie, this young lady has kind of unknowingly become a part of his quest for identity early on, and they're sitting in this cafeteria, this cafe, and he takes it, he reaches into this bag, and he throws out like a number of passports upon the table, and he says, who does this? Who does this? Who has in their safety deposit box at the bank, who has 6 passports, all kinds of cash, and a gun? I mean, what is this? He says, since we've been in here, I've looked at every exit. I know where every entrance and every exit is in the building. She says, Jason, I know where all the exits are. You've been wounded. People who are wounded, they do strange things. They know amazing things. He says, yeah, but he says, I know that guy over there at the counter weighs 215 and he can handle himself. I know that the waitress is left-handed. I know that the best place to find a gun would be in the cab of the gray pickup truck out there, and I can tell you the license plates on all 6 cars out there. I know that at this altitude that I could run for a half mile without my hands shaking. Now there's a part of me that always wants to think, man, I wish I was that guy. My list would be like, who has $1.42 in their bank security box? I know that the waitress just spilled coffee on me. I know that guy over there likes meatloaf. I'm not sure where to find a gun, and if I found one, I'm not sure if I could fire it or not. And if I ran about 40 yards at this altitude, I'd really be gassed. Identity. I think the bottom line is that all of us, especially as followers of Christ, I think all of us have a little Jason Bourne in us. You think? That sometimes when we're actually looking in our quest, in our journey for our identity, that we have a tendency, like Jason Bourne, to probably look sometimes at our past, things that we have done or things that have been done for us, our raising, things done to us. That we have a tendency to look at what we do. We look at what we are doing and what we have done, and maybe sometimes even project into the future. And we make those same mistakes that Jason Bourne does. Our identity is found in how we see ourselves. Now, the world will talk about self-worth and self-esteem. And that's true, and there's some, people kind of counter back and forth whether that's a healthy thing or not. But really, truly, when we're talking about our identity, folks, it all comes back to this. How I see myself is my identity. How I see myself is my identity. How you see yourself is your identity, at least for the present time. Now, why is that so important? I mean, why is this whole thing even a conversation right now? Well, what do we find our identity in? Those are some questions that we might need to ask. It's important because my identity determines my decisions, and my decisions determine absolutely the trajectory of my life. It determines what I go to when I am insecure. My identity is important because it's what I lean into. It allows me to function properly in relationships and in roles God has put in your or my life, or not to function properly in those roles, if my identity is out of whack somehow. So if it's so important, how do you think you and I really ID our identity? How do you think that's done? Well, a couple ideas. As I thought about this, one, I thought about, okay, what do we think about a lot? That might have something to do with our identity. How do we picture ourselves? What do we think about early in the morning? What do you find yourself talking about? That might be a lead to your identity and how you see yourself. James likes to talk about sometimes having this big jar, and that sometimes in our lives we have to take all the rocks out and then put the big rocks, what are supposed to be important, in, and then he says the little rocks fit. And I would say that is, we'll take the time to get the jar out and unscrew the lid and begin to take the rocks out. When we get to the really big rocks, we might be on the path to finding where we find our identity. It's what we worry about. It's what we can't imagine not having or not being. Losing your job, does that shake you down to the ankles? Might be your identity. Thinking about losing all the money in your retirement account or your savings account, that might be your identity. It's an important thing. And finding out and really recognizing where your identity is found is an important thing also. So what are some of the things that you and I put our identity in? I think we put them in our duties. I think a lot of us put our identity in what we do as a career or a job or even a homemaker. Sometimes our identity is found there. I'm a dad, or I'm a mom, or I'm a dad of the best ball player, or a mom of the best cheerleader, or a mom of the president of the name the team or the club. Sometimes it's what we do as a career. Sometimes it's in our duties. Sometimes it's in things that we have done either morally or ethically or not done. Some kind of a lapse in a conviction in the past that can become an identity thing for you and I. It's those duties. Sometimes it has to do with our even further in our past. Sometimes it has to do with our relationships, or what you might call our tribe, our family, or the friends. And you'll hear people drop names sometimes, and you know that they want to be identified with this particular person that they deem important, and you hope that they will see you as important as a result. Ever dropped names before? I have. So sometimes it's in our duties, and sometimes it's in our tribe or our family. I am Steve Moss. Doesn't that mean something to you? You know, the Mosses. Family, tribe, I'm a Cherokee, or I'm a Sioux, or I'm whatever. All those things can become our identity. Sometimes we find our identity in our wallet. Sometimes you and I find our security, our confidence, our identity, who we are, how we see ourselves in our wallet. And it's not so much necessarily a matter of how much, because sometimes we have very little, sometimes we have a whole lot, sometimes we have just enough. It's just the fact that we look there for our security, our confidence. Maybe that's not making sense to you. I can see the looks on your faces. Let me tell you a story. This is a story of identity. This is a story of children finding our identity where it is supposed to be found in a very slow fashion. The story is found in the book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus, you'll find God with his children Israel. And in the early chapters, you see these people who have been in the country of Egypt for 400 years. 400 years. That's certainly enough time to find your identity in your locale, to find your identity in your tribe, to find your identity in who you are. And who they are is a very, very oppressed people in the country of Pharaoh. 400 years. That means you are what you are. Your dad is what he was. His grandfather, great-grandfather. All these people have lived in Egypt under oppression for this many years. Identity was probably not real strong at that time, or at least in the right places. And so what you see is you see God, you see God beginning to kind of touch these people. He calls Moses into the situation to call them out of Egypt, and he does this series of plagues and miracles so the people of Egypt and Pharaoh will eventually kind of release them, and he delivers his people out of Egypt from slavery to freedom through a series of amazing kind of things that they all kind of get to set over in their country and just kind of watch God do all this stuff and go, wow, maybe he really does care. And so they come out, and so in Exodus 16th chapter, okay, since they have been in oppression for 400 years, we find them in the desert, interesting place, a place called the Desert of Sin. The Desert of Sin. They've been there, it says, about 40 days plus. So they've been in captivity about 400 years, and now they've been out in the desert area for about 40 days. I don't know what they did for food the first 35 or whatever days, okay? Maybe they brought it with them. I'm not sure. Maybe they stopped at Taco Bell before they came into the Desert of Sin, and Taco Bell didn't want to build any more restaurants in the Desert of Sin. That doesn't look like a good location to build a restaurant. And so I don't know what the deal is, but they're out there, and they get hungry. And here's what happens. And there's millions of them, remember. This is not a small group of people. There are millions of people. And they begin to grumble. If you know anything about the story, these people were professional grumblers. And they're out there grumbling, and here's the first thing they say. We're hungry. And when we were back there, we had pots of food we would gather around and eat all we wanted. Why would God take us from that and lead us out here so our whole tribe will starve to death? Next verse, God hears them. And he goes to Moses and he says, immediately, he says, these people will be taken care of. In the evening, there's going to be this major flock of quail. They're going to come in and land, I don't know, fall dead to the earth. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but they're going to find them on the ground, and they're going to eat quail. And every morning when the dew goes away, there's going to be this bread. And every day, all they have to do is go out and get an omer for each person. That's enough for the day and enough for their families. And on the sixth day, get two. Don't get too much on Tuesday. Just get enough for Tuesday and enough for Wednesday. Enough for each day. I'm paying attention. Friday, enough for Friday and Saturday. So, okay. And so that's what happens. The quail come in and the people are fed. And every morning, the manna, what is it, is what the people call it, manna, this bread is there. God provides for them every day. At the end of the chapter, he says that for those 40 years, that manna was there each day, and all they had to do was go out and gather that manna up. Amazing. It also says, this is kind of cool, that the manna was like coriander, which I don't understand that exactly, but it had a taste of honey to it. So not only, folks, not only does God provide for them, but also he gives a little taste of honey. And isn't that like God? He could have made it like, really, really bad bread. He could have made really hard bread. This is good bread. It had a taste of honey to it. He provides for them. But that's not all. Also, right in the middle of it, you'll find that on the sixth day, when they are to get their bread for day 6 and 7, that on the seventh day, God says, don't go out. Don't go out. Take your bread that you collected for the 6th day and eat it for the 7th day and rest. I'm going to give you a day that you don't have to work. I don't want you to work. I want you to rest because children need to rest. I need you to have a day when you pull back. I need you to have a day when you can just think about me. And I'm going to take care of your needs. You just do what I ask you to do, and I'm going to make sure you get the rest physically and emotionally and relationally and all those things that you need. If you'll just do what I ask, I'm going to provide. Amazing thing. And by this time, you're saying to me, Steve, nice story. You did a swell job of telling it. What in the world does that have to do with what we're talking about today? And I would tell you that I think it has a lot to do with the story. Because I don't believe, folks, that our identity, that your and I's identity, when we find it in our wallet, I don't think it's a cash thing. I don't think it's a cash thing. I think it's a trust thing. And this story, although you don't see any of the Israelites reaching in their wallet, and going, whoa, I'm hungry. What do we got? They'd probably already done that. Maybe found nothing. I don't know. But I tend to think that this whole finding our identity and our wallet deal, see, we reach for our wallet when? We reach for our wallet when we have what we believe is a need. And we reach for our wallet because we believe the answer to that need is right here in the wallet. This is a big thought here. And I want you to dwell on it for a second. That God's primary way of teaching his children in the wilderness what their true identity was by revealing his nature as their father. That's the fact that he would provide for them and take care and provide rest. And then testing them to see if they would trust him. And it was a test. He said that. Will you trust me? This is a test. He revealed his nature. I'm going to take care of you. Will you trust that I will do that time and time again because I'm dad and you're kid? I don't think it has to do with cash. And see, so what happens, the very, very first thing in this is when they get hungry, which is a real need. This is a real need. They're hungry. Their kids are hungry, and their kids are crying. And if you've ever seen a hungry kid, that's not a happy, pleasurable experience. And so they're experiencing hunger, and their children are hungry. And so what's the first thing they do? They reach not only just for their wallet, but they reach for the memories of the past. And they're going, hey, when we were back there, what? We were met around pots of food. We had everything we wanted. Isn't it interesting? Just a little sidebar. Isn't it interesting that God's children and us, that when we think of the past, sometimes we just get pretty doggone nostalgic? Did they forget that they had chains around their ankles? Did they forget that they had to work day and night to provide bricks for Pharaoh? That they were an incredibly oppressed, captive people for all those years? All they could remember when the need came and the hunger started was, back there, we met around pots of food. We had everything we wanted. We just partied and the music was playing. Man, it was a good life back in Egypt. Amazing, isn't it? What they reached for and what you and I reach for. And God saw them and heard them, and he took care of this need immediately. And he provided. Not only does he take care of our past that we reach for, because here's why we do that. Here's why we do that. We reach for our past. We reach for our past for either one of two reasons. We reach for our past to either sustain our past by our wallet, because some of us have grown up with quite a bit. We had all we needed. Maybe we lived at this level, and quite honestly, we're fearful that we aren't going to be able to maintain that level, drive that same car, live in that same type of neighborhood, have those same type of friends, have the same kind of job. We're fearful of living down here. And so when people start talking about sacrificing or giving or taking a job that doesn't pay so much so we can pay more attention to our family, we go, oh, well, I don't know about that, because, see, I'm used to this. And so sometimes our identity and our security is found in our wallet to sustain the past. And sometimes as parents, I'm just going to say, sometimes as parents, we do a very unfair thing to our children by allowing them to live up here because their identity becomes up here. And they can't see themselves living down here. It causes all kinds of problems. But that's another lesson, isn't it? So we go to sustain it, or sometimes we try to overcome it. We try to overcome it because we grew up with very little, all right, and we didn't have maybe needs met, or we were just always scratching, and we make this decision, I'm not going to live like that, which isn't necessarily wrong to overcome it, unless it just becomes the driving force in our life. Like a young man I talked to recently, whose every thought is about getting ahead, who constantly thinks, and you can see it in his eyes, he is ambitious. He is driven. And you can see bigger houses, and you can see bigger cars, and you can see the frustration because everybody's not buying in, and they get frustrated when he is not being who he should be in the relationships around him, he can't fathom not getting to where he wants to be. And I thought, wow, what a drivenness. I'm going to ask him about his past. And guess what? Grew up poor as dirt. And he's not going to be like he grew up. And again, that's not such a bad thing, except all his relationships that should mean something mean very little. Because his identity is all about overcoming the past and not being what he was. So sometimes it's about the past, and sometimes it's just simply about provision. And one of the hardest things for us to learn is that God has said to us, and he proved to them over a 40-year period, that's a lot of years, I will take care of your needs. One, I see your needs, I am capable of taking care of your needs, and I will take care of your needs. Just don't worry about it. How much time, how much energy do you and I spend thinking about tomorrow and the next day and whether those things will be taken care of or not, when God says, I got manna for you today, and I'll have manna for you tomorrow and the day after. But you can't gather 2 days for one. You can just gather today's manna. And our identity, because we begin to think that we are the ones responsible for providing, we begin to plan ahead, and we become like that man who filled his barns and then said, I think I'll just lay back and rest now. God will provide. God will provide our needs, and sometimes with a little honey on it. Now, honestly, I have to pitch in that we have to sometimes be careful of what we deem needs, because what we deem needs and what he deems needs may be two different things. But he'll take care of our needs, and a lot of times he'll put some honey on it. Not always. I've driven some cars that didn't have any honey in them. I've sat on some furniture in my life that didn't have any honey. But sometimes we get the honey too. Our past and our provision are times that we reach for our wallet. And the third thing is, when we reach for our wallet, I think is in the area of pleasure. It's in the area of pleasure because we work hard, don't we? I mean, we work hard and we wear ourselves out, and we want pleasure. We want to rest. We want something relaxing. So if we're not careful, that becomes something where our identity is found, and we spend a lot of energy and a lot of time talking, a lot of time saving for that something to buy us rest, to purchase rest for us. And the problem is you can purchase a vacation, but you can't purchase rest, right? Now, I'm not anti-vacation. I mean, I tell you unashamedly that Dawn and I right now, we have been putting some money back, and Labor Day weekend, we're taking our whole kit and caboodle to Destin, Florida. We're going to hang about 4 days on the beach. I'm going to rollick in the waves with the grandkids and be turned over every way by the waves. Can't wait for it. Then Dawn and I are going to take about 6 days after that and just sleep. So I'm not anti-vacation, but here's what I've learned. You can vacation for weeks, near months. You can vacation for a long time and not be rested, right? And we spend all kinds of money, and we work overtime, and we do all kinds of things, and with this idea that we're going to be rested. And God says, I built it into your week so that you can be physically rested, and you can be emotionally rested, and that you can be mentally rested, and you can be relationally rested, and you can just let yourself unwind in the RPMs if you will just do what I say. Chick-fil-A gets that. And they seem to have done relatively well as a corporation. All we can think about is, do you know how much more money they'd make if they were open on Sundays? They're going, no, there's bigger things. Be a good lesson for us to learn, to sit back and allow God to give us what he does if we listen to the rhythm that he built for us, that we take time back and don't fill every moment of every day with our activities and the activities of our children, and then at the same time trying to save for a once a week or once a year vacation to wherever, where we go crazy and spend lots of money and come back broke and unrested. Ow. I know. I've made that mistake too. And And so, but really, I'll just say this before I go on. One of the biggest searches of my life in the last year, and I'm making a list right now, what really rests me? What has God given me that really, truly brings Sabbath to my life? It's a pretty cool list. It's amazing how I don't go to it, how I go to other stuff. But I'm trying to build into my life the things that I realize really, truly rest me. Finding my identity in what God has already given me. Our past, our provisions, our rest. Now, you might be thinking, why is that such a big idea? Why is that such an important thing? As we used to say when we were growing up, like, what's the big whoop? So what's the big whoop here? Well, why is this so important, Steve, that we're talking about this? It's because we reach for our wallet to overcome or sustain our past, for our provision, for the pleasure of trust, or for the pleasure of rest. It's a big, listen, folks, it's a big idea. It's a problem. It's a big thing because it's offensive to God. I don't know how else to say it. Hey, do we get this? This whole Exodus 16 thing, this doesn't end there. There's a lot more to this story. Matter of fact, there is like 39 plus years to this story. You know what we're saying? Is that God takes these people from Egypt, and before he will deliver them to the promised land, his primary concern is this. His primary concern is, hey, I am your dad. You are my kids. Will you trust me? And I'm not taking you there. I've taken you out of there, but I'm not taking you there until you learn. This is a 40-year experience for them. A 40-year experiment. I am your God and Father. You are my children. Will you trust me as a dad to take care of you? And he leaves them out there in the desert a long, long time until they finally begin to get that idea. So their identity is not so much in their providing for themselves, but allowing God to provide for them. It's a big idea, folks. It's a big deal. I don't know, really, honestly, I don't know very many things in the New Testament that Jesus draws a deeper line in the sand in than things of finances. Now, we don't like to think about that, but he draws a deep line in the sands when he says, you cannot serve God and money. You will either love one and hate the other, or hate one and love the other. We cannot do it. We want a little bit of both, but it's a trust issue. Will we trust him to provide for us in these situations and circumstances? Will we trust him as a father? I want this time together. I didn't want it to feel like me chucking rocks at you because you're not getting it right. Because that wouldn't be right. And that's not the case, because many of you are faithful in your identity is in where it's supposed to be, and it's not in your wallet. And the other truth of the matter is that I've made all kinds and still make mistakes. I struggled with some of this stuff in the last week. We have more money in savings than ever, and I found myself wanting to hoard the savings. Like, oh, we got this much. Look at this. We can do this. And all of a sudden, I'm overcome with this, having how much I can have in this savings account that I've really never even had before. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, well, that's exactly what I'm wanting to tell to the people. So I need you to know that I struggle with this. So I don't want to be about chucking rocks. I want us to know this is for you and I. It is a matter of whether you and I will trust a Father who says he will take care of us. That's what it's about. And that the burden is not all on you and I. That it is not about what you and I do, and it is not about what we are doing or what we have done. It is about what has been done for us. And yeah, we're talking about the wallet, but we can be talking about anything today. Where is your identity? Jason Bourne finds his identity. He finds out his name. But then he really finds his identity. It comes in rather traumatic time when he actually he's got this guy and he's leaning this guy over kind of the edge of this very, very high building. Like tell me or die kind of a moment. And he's leaning this guy over. He's got his hand on his throat. This means a lot to him. He has got to find out where his identity is and who his identity is in. And he's got his hand on the throat, and he's leaning this man over, and he says, why? Why did he die? Tell me, why did he die? And you know what the man says? He says, he died for you. He says, your dad was an operative. That just means that he was in the middle of everything, making things happen. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? And he says that he didn't want you to become a killer. He didn't want you to suffer the consequences of being the bad guy, of doing the wrong thing. So he died for you, Jason. Jason Bourne finds his identity because he knows who his father is and he recognizes what his father has done. It doesn't have anything to do with how many people he chases down in fights or whatever, or who he is or who he has been or what has been done to him. His identity is found in his Father. And folks, I'm going to tell you, man, we just spent 9 weeks in the book of Ephesians finding our identity in Christ there. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in the heavenly realms with every spiritual blessing in Christ. Does that sound like the kind of Father who would withhold from us? For he chose us in him. He chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless. In love, he predestined us for adoption. There's that sonship through Jesus Christ. In accordance with his pleasure, he found pleasure in this, to the praise of his glorious grace. He has given us in the one he loves, and in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches, bread with a little honey on it, of his grace. Man, I want mine, I want your identity to be firmly in what God is to us as a Father and what he has done for us through his Son, Jesus Christ. Now, I need to wrap this. And I thought long and hard, because James and I are saying, okay, what's something we could tell these folks they could take home? And I just can't get it down to one thing. Actually, I can, but you don't want to hear that. So I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you that when I deal with couples, one who has found someone else to give their heart and love to, we call it adultery in that world, that my counsel is fairly clear to them. First, you must find the lie. You must admit the lie is a lie and nothing else. Specifically, it's nothing else but a lie. Sometimes we're living lies when our identity is found in something else other than our identity as a son of God or daughter of God. It's a lie. And two, we must treat that relentlessly with the truth. And so I would ask, if you're looking for something practically to do, I'll tell you what to do. I'd get Ephesians 1 out and 2, and I'd read it every day. Take you 5 minutes slowly for the next 30 days and begin to overcome that lie with the truth of what God says about who you are and who he is. We have what I call one call when I'm dealing with couples who have done adultery. I say, you're in a relationship with someone else. You get one call to tell them it's over and no more communication with them. And and they will try to communicate with you, and your past identity will want to communicate back to you, I promise. They will keep calling you back and leaving voicemails. You get one call to look that lie in the face and say, I am done with you. And you meet it with truth. And then you begin to build the trust again. And in relationship with your spouse, that takes a long time to do. But you know what? In your relationship with God, here's the part you didn't want to hear. You can begin that very easily with one step. And that is by showing that you trust him by giving back to him. The only way that I really know to increase my faith is by being obedient. In this matter, it means that I begin to recognize that he will provide my needs and meet them no matter what, and so I'm going to give to him. That's it. Call it a lie. Meet it with truth. Make one call to break it up, and take one step to begin to build trust. My hope is that if you've never declared Christ as Lord, that you've not found identity in Christ or in God as a child of God, that you would make that decision to trust him. My hope is that you might join this body of believers as we pursue that. My hope is that you'll begin to find your identity in who God says you are as a child of the King. Let's stand and sing together.